Earlier this week, there was an issue with North Korea, firing off a missile. Seemed to be aimed at the perfect timing with the Japanese prime minister being in the country at the time this happened. Wanted to find out a little more about the circumstances surrounding that. Bruce Klingner is joining us right now. He specializes in Korean and Japanese affairs at the Heritage Foundation at their Asian Studies Center. Bruce, how are you?
Very good. Thanks for having me.
No, thank you. I appreciate that. So, how serious is it? We found out a little bit more about the missile the Koreans fired this time.
Right. Yeah. It's many had been expecting an ICBM missile, what would be the first test of an ICBM, very long range, because North Korea's leader had said they're at the late stages of development and they would launch anywhere, anytime. So this was a much shorter range, probably a medium range, but actually still very significant. It's an improvement over the system that they have. What they took was the submarine-launched ballistic missile and made a land version of it. So it's a new missile, it's a new launcher. And what's significant is it's a solid fuel. And the reason that's important is because you can shoot and scoot with, on a mobile launcher much quicker with a solid fuel than a liquid fuel, so they can fire it quicker. It makes it harder for us to find it and target it if we need to, and it's much more survivable in that way.
So a more serious threat than what we've seen up to this point?
Exactly. So
Okay,
the missile that they have now, which is liquid fuel, might take 40 minutes to fuel before it can fire. So that gives us more time to find it if we have to in a crisis. That missile, we think, is nuclear capable, and presumably this one will be as well. So this one may be able to fire within just a few minutes. So it makes it much more difficult to deter and, if necessary, defend against that threat.
I wonder, was this just a test of the Trump administration, do you think?
Well, we always debate when North Korea does something, why they did it and why did they do it now. So, we'll have a lot of disagreements over ourselves and amongst ourselves. And, I tend to focus more on the event rather than the motivation. So it could have been simply the scientists said, we need to test it. It's time. It could have been, designed to go during the Trump-Abe summit, to test either Trump and or Abe. What is surprising is that they did it now, because when I was in South Korea last week, I met with a lot of very senior leadership. Everyone thought North Korea wouldn't test for several months, because right now in South Korea they're going through a political crisis. Their president was impeached, and there likely will be a presidential election in about 2 or 3 months. And so the thinking was that North Korea wouldn't do a provocation, because that would tend to help the conservative parties, which North Korea would not want.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I just want to touch on a little bit of your background here, just so people understand where you're coming from. You were the CIA Deputy Division Chief for Korea, and from 93 to 94, Chief of the CIA's Korea branch, analyzing military developments over there. So that I give that background for my next question. The threat is obviously perceived by Japan, because this missile was fired out into the water, I believe, and also South Korea, which is right there. Do any of these countries have the Israeli equivalent of an Iron Dome? I mean, do they have the ability to intercept and or take out one of these missiles if they needed to?
Right. Well, the Japanese are actually, pretty far down the road on missile defense. They have Patriot missiles, which are sort of a low level, kind of a 20, 30 mile or kilometer bubble. They also have what's called an SM-3, a Standard Missile 3, and that's actually very capable. So they're pretty well protected. The South Koreans have been resistant till recently for more extensive missile defense. Under liberal governments, they saw that if they either criticized the North Korean government or took defensive measures, that it would undermine their policy of reaching out and engaging North Korea. Right now, there's a very big issue between the U.S. and South Korea. Both governments have agreed to deploy a better missile defense system called the THAAD, which will better improve or better protect South Korea as well as our U.S. forces there. South Korea had kind of been dragging their feet on it, but then they agreed early last year to do it. and we're hoping to have that deployed certainly by the end of the year, if not earlier.
Bruce Klingner is our guest from the Heritage Foundation. Bruce, one last question here. But in terms of what the Trump administration can do, it strikes me that there are already so many sanctions against North Korea. What is the next step to try to get them to take us seriously when we tell them that they've got to stop these kind of provocations?
Well, there are a lot of misperceptions and mischaracterizations of sanctions, and actually there's a lot more we can do. The Obama administration really talked a good game, but they underperformed. They had what I call timid incrementalism. So they did not fully utilize all the authorities they had. They did not fully enforce U.S. law. For example, last year was the first year that the U.S. had finally cumulatively sanctioned as many North Korean entities as we had sanctioned Zimbabwe entities.
Oh, wow.
So there's a lot of misunderstanding. So there are things we can do. We have all the existing authority or all the necessary authorities to do it. It's just we haven't really used them. So I'm hoping the Trump administration will sort of more fully engage on sanctions. There's when I talk to folks in the government, they're like, yeah, we have other entities we can sanction. We're just waiting till the next provocation to roll out a few more entities to be sanctioned. So, it's like, we know there are 20 bank robbers in the city, and after each time someone robs a bank, we'll rob one more, even though we have evidence against the others.
I know it's a little bit off the subject here, but I read a story today in Al Jazeera that Kim Jong-un's half-brother was assassinated in Malaysia.
Yep, it's always an interesting day working North Korea. Yeah, it's there's some conflicting stories, either a poison needle or sort of a poison spray. That's really right up North Korea's alley. There have been a number of cases, South Korean court cases, where North Korean agents were arrested and prosecuted for planning on or actually assassinating North Korean exiles or escapees with poison needles, and they even captured some of these needle pens. So it's some things they've done before. And Kim Jong Un, he had his uncle assassinated, within North Korea, had him killed or executed by anti-aircraft artillery.
Jeez.
And so he's willing to go after family members, in that case by marriage, but now apparently even his own half-brother.
That's crazy. Bruce Klingner, listen, I appreciate your time from the Heritage Foundation, the Northeast Asia Studies Center. Thanks for your time.
Oh, well, thanks for having me again.
Yeah, take care of yourself. Appreciate having him on. But, boy, what a wealth of information Bruce Klingner is. Oh, and by the way, with all of his background, working for the CIA and all this stuff, he's like a third-degree black belt in Taekwondo. So we need to get Bruce nearby, and he can protect us as well as tell us all about Korea. That's pretty cool. All right, 314-969-9797. I'm going to get to some more of your phone calls. Plus, we've got Rob Green coming up to talk a little bit more about Andy Puzder, to tell us more about the man that is apparently now in the sights of the Democrats who are trying to shut down his effort to be the labor secretary. They might even coerce a few Republicans into joining them. 314-969-9797.
That's why the lady is a tramp.